Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. As the US plans major changes in H1B visas, India on Thursday said it was closely engaged with the Trump administration as well as the US Congress on the matter. The comment by the spokesperson in the Ministry of External Affairs came after Washington said it is planning to revise the definition of employment and specialty occupations under the H1B visas by January, a move which will have an adverse impact on Indian IT companies in the United States. The H1B visa, most sought after among IT professionals, is a non-immigrant visa that allows US companies to employ foreign workers in specialty occupations that require theoretical or technical expertise. The technology companies depend on it to hire tens of thousands of employees each year from countries like India and China. The Department of Homeland Security said on Wednesday that the US Citizenship and Immigration Services plans to come out with its new proposal by January 2019. It will propose to revise the definition of specialty occupation to increase focus on obtaining the best and the brightest foreign nationals via the H1B program. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the proposed changes in the H1B visas and their implications. Joining me on the program today are Prabhu Dayal, former ambassador, KP Nair, strategic analyst, and Professor Sriram Chaulia, Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. First, let's try and put into perspective what the H1B visa is and who benefits the most out of it.
Well, you have very correctly in your introduction given a summary of what the H1B visa is. It is a visa which is given by the Immigration and Naturalization Service to employers in the US to bring in foreign workers for specialty occupations. Now, the specialty occupation aspect is not very precisely defined. H1B visas have been given to engineers, to people working in the world of finance, banking, medicine, architecture. But what is of interest to us is that mainly it is given to professionals who are working in the IT industry, particularly as software programmers. A large number of H1B applicants are from India, and while 20,000 H1B visas are given to people passing out of universities in the US with master's degrees, 65,000 more H1B visas are given to people who are considered to be required in specialty occupations. Now, a very large number of people who got the H1B visas were from India. And any tightening of regulations in this regard is naturally bound to hit Indian applicants. You very rightly said that there may be a review of what specialty occupations are. It is true that the issue of foreign workers coming has been of interest to the US politicians for quite some time. In fact, during the last presidential election, both Hillary Clinton and President Donald Trump took up this issue in great detail, and this was something that was very, very actively discussed in the US media also. I think that they have in mind three very important aspects. Firstly, there is to be a proposed narrowing down of what constitutes a specialty occupation. In other words, very few occupations will be considered as specialty occupations. I have seen reports in the US media which indicate that even applicants for positions in fields of artificial intelligence, for instance, are being denied H1B visas. The second aspect will be the wage aspect, that is to say, regulating the employer-employee relationship. There is a proposal to hike the minimum wage to be paid under the H1B visa program from $60,000 US to over $130,000 US. That is to say, more than doubling the wage requirement. There is, of course, very interestingly also a proposal to curb the period for which, the duration for which the H1B visa is given. Presently, this visa is given for a period of 3 years, and it is extended for a period of another 3 years. Furthermore, it can be extended even more if the applicant's green card application is under process. It is believed that this term, the duration of the H1B visa is proposed to be cut down quite severely.
Right.
In fact, recently, the US Naturalization and Immigration Service on its own tried to restrict and gave H1B visas for as little as a week or 2 weeks. And in fact, their decisions have been challenged in the courts.
Right.
It is not yet clear what is going to be the entire gamut of the changes that are proposed. Things will become more clear by January 2019. In any case, it will require acts of Congress to see matters through. It may not happen very quickly. It is expected that if at all changes go into effect, they will perhaps happen not before August 2019.
Right. Right.
Nonetheless, things do concern us because a very large number of H1B visa holders are employed by Indian IT giants.
Sure.
And also by smaller IT companies owned by Indo-American citizens.
Right.
In the IT industry. These are small contractors which service larger companies.
Right.
So, because of the fact that proposed changes could affect us, we have to be very vigilant, and I understand that our government has been taking up this matter with the US authorities on a continuous basis.
Right.
And even during the visit of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, this matter was discussed. Things will become more clear as time goes on, but present indications are that these are the aspects which could be affected.
Thank you for summing it up and, putting it so beautifully for us. Mr. Nair, what is the process really if these norms have to be changed? Clearly, it can't be done by an executive order passed by the president. There has to be a process that is followed.
The process as of now seems to be unending. Let me tell you my experience a few months ago. I was in Washington for a conference, and one session was on H1B. It was a closed-door conference. It was an off-the-record conference. So this people from State Department came to speak to us. I shall not name them, but because it was an off-the-record conference, but they were very senior people. And in the course of the discussion, they said that nothing has changed with H1B, and this was a few months ago. So see, they also can't speak openly because President Trump is claiming, after all, he campaigned on this issue that he'll curb H1B visas and he'll give jobs that are going to foreigners to Americans. So that is his election promise. That is his campaign plank, one of his campaign.
But thus far, he's been walking the talk.
No, not really.
Okay.
Because you see, on the one hand, he claims that he is fulfilling his campaign promise. So people from State Department cannot publicly speak against the president.
Right.
And this private session, they told us that nothing has changed. Absolutely. I mean, now President Trump is going to complete half his office. And until now, only two things have changed. One is that he has stopped spouses from working. That again was the case. Ever since H1B visas were introduced, that was the case. Spouses couldn't work. Or President Obama changed it. So it's only this brief period that they could work. So Trump has gone back. It was very easy to go back because that's an easy thing that can be done without any damage to the economy, IT industry or anything. So in order to show that he is walking the talk, as you said, he has done it. That has changed. Second thing is, some companies used to fast-track H1B visas, which he has stopped, which again was very good because ordinary H1B applicants or smaller companies which applied to bring people, they had a huge backlog. They had to wait 9 months and all that to get a visa. Whereas big companies, IT majors, which had the resources, they would pay extra money. You see, all American visa system, well, most countries all over the world, the visa system is based on money, legally giving money. I mean, to get a Russian visa, for example, if you want it in 2 days, I have once paid, I had to join Prime Minister in Moscow. So in Washington, I paid $300 to get my Russian visa in 2 days. So same way, this H1B fast tracking meant that IT companies paid a lot of money to the US government legally.
Right.
I mean, it's not a bribe or anything. So Trump has stopped that, saying that H1B applications should be normally handled. So as this State Department people admitted, and as I myself know since I follow the case, except for these two administrative measures, nothing has changed. H1B continues like it is. And today's story is a proposal. I mean, it is a proposal. And the proposal will be discussed for 1 year at various, what we call in India, what we call Janata Adalat and all that. Similarly, there will be public hearings, there will be all sorts of things for 1 year. August 2019. So, in essence, there is a lot of news, media makes a big issue about it, IT companies make a lot of issue about this, but nothing has changed. Eventually it may change, but so far, except for these two administrative things, nothing has changed.
Right.
And nothing will change until, even in August 2019, it will not change, because public hearings will close in August 2019. Then you have to go to Congress, you have to get the bill approved by the President, and meanwhile lobbyists will be active, I mean, in the United States, everything is done by lobbyists,
Absolutely.
So I am quite sanguine about this.
So just to sum it up, it may eventually change, but it will take some time. It's not going to happen immediately is what you're suggesting. All right, let me go across to Professor Sriram Chaulia. Now, Professor, who stands to lose out the most, if at all, these changes come into being?
Frank, whenever Trump or any protectionist talks about restricting trade or migration, be it H1B or other forms of goods and services, the biggest loser will obviously be the US economy. And that has been our argument. In fact, that is borne out by scientific studies and research as well into the H1B program. Neutral studies show that H1B has actually been a net positive for the US economy and even for US jobs, for American workers. Because, the wage differential, and the outsourcing model on the basis of which H1B is beneficial to American companies means that they generate higher profits and they can also do additional hiring of American workers. So overall, if you see the productivity of US industry and of the US manufacturing, of US services, all of these depend on outsourcing. So what Trump is trying to do, this whole anti-globalization push, is to try and force companies to relocate and to end outsourcing, and for more Americans to be hired at a higher wage level. It actually negates the very concept of comparative advantage, which is the basis for trade. So I don't think American employers are going to buy it. By the way, it's not only Tech Mahindra, TCS, Wipro and Infosys that benefit from H1B. We must remember that even IBM and Intel also use H1B, although to a lesser extent. And Silicon Valley has been protesting what Trump has been doing from the day he has been inaugurated. All the big tech giants in the United States are concerned that these measures, if fully implemented, will lead to actually a lowering of the competitiveness of the US tech industry itself. And of course, remember one thing which has not been mentioned by my colleagues is that India does export a significant amount of software services to the United States. About 57% of our entire tech exports, software exports, go to one market, which is the US. It used to be around 80%, but 57% we have diversified somewhat, but still the dependence is high. So TCS, Tech Mahindra, Wipro and Infosys, the big four, these types of companies do also enhance their export capability and the human resource pool, the talent pool they have through the H1B, because the workers who go to the US, acquire the contacts, work with American clients, then come back home to India, they are more capable, and that in turn makes our industry more competitive. So there has been a lot of talk that we should diversify our software exports. We should look at Asia Pacific, Latin America, Japan, Africa. I think that is already underway, and I'm afraid that if Trump lives up to his populist potential and does take drastic action, we will have to increase our diversification strategy, because that's one way. But overall, to answer your question, I think there will be losers on both sides. Okay. And especially in the US, because in trade of services or goods, Frank, the theory says, and it is correct, that the losers are concentrated and few. The gainers are diffused but many. Right. And the few losers are the ones that Trump is highlighting in order to gain political mileage, to create this xenophobic anti-foreigner sentiment and to claim that, you know, buy American, hire American. But in the long run, it is going to hamper American interests and American economy. Same goes with tariffs, same goes with curbs on immigration or on H1B. So I think there will be enough of a resistance within the US corporate sector to what Trump is doing. And the kind of businessman that Trump is, he does talk quite fierily, but at the end of the day, if American profits are at stake and if the US economy slows down as a result of these kind of measures, I think he will backtrack. I feel that it is a lot of posturing before the congressional elections to shore up his white working class base, to show that, look, I'm fighting for American jobs, but this is a far more complicated matter, not as simplistic as the populists in the US say.
All right. We'll come back to the midterm elections in just a bit, but before that, taking a cue from what Mr. Nair said, Ambassador, he said that, at the end of the day, apart from a couple of administrative, issues, H1B visa remains the same. But that does not mean we sit back and keep quiet. India should continue to talk about this and continue to take it up diplomatically, isn't it?
Well, frankly, I would not be sanguine about the situation at all, because already the changes, the whiff of changes seem to be in the air. Mr. Nair very rightly pointed out that the H4 visa program, under which spouses got employment authorization, is going to be scrapped. President Trump is totally against it. Similarly, he has been emphasizing that slogan, buy American, hire American. And he is very serious about it. In fact, they had tried to push through certain decisions through presidential acts. But because changes in the H1B visa program require congressional approval, therefore any short-term visas, for instance, that were issued by the US authorities have been challenged in the courts. There is a body called the US IT Advisory Council, which has, on behalf of 1,000 IT companies, filed a lawsuit against the US government for issuing visas under the H1B program for less than 3 years, because they said that under the US laws, H1B visas have to be issued for 3 years and are extendable by a further 3 years later. So sometimes I find that the authorities have been acting in haste, but their determination to place restrictions on the H1B visa program is very clear, and we cannot be sanguine about it.
Right.
A lot can be achieved through dialogue, and I think our government is engaged in such dialogue with the US authorities. I have mentioned earlier that we stand to lose. Of course, I also meant to indicate that it's going to be something that the US tech companies would also seem to lose out on.
Right.
If they do not get a good pool of talent to work for them, or if they have to pay abnormally high wages for work that is to be done, then naturally their costs will go up, and ultimately the end user is going to be a loser.
Sure. So there's going to be a cascading effect is what you're suggesting.
I think it is going to be a cascading effect, and something that may not work to the advantage of anybody at all.
Absolutely. All right. Mr. Nair, this is not the first time that this issue has come up. It's been revisited maybe 3 or 4 times. Why hasn't it been implemented yet? What's the issue really? I mean, do they want to do it? Do they not want to do it? What's the issue?
Well, not 3 or 4 times. ever since I went to the United States as a correspondent in 2000, this has come up from time to time. You know, it's an emotive issue, because for politicians this is a good plank. It sells. You know, don't hire foreigners, give the jobs to Americans. So politicians keep it alive. Because it's a good election issue, especially not so much for the president, but in congressional elections and in elections to the Senate. This is a good thing for the politicians to keep up. But at the same time, they take money from IT companies. They take money from Silicon Valley. I mean, not bribes. They take money legally through campaign finance, you know, and since campaign finance was liberalized during the Bush era, Supreme Court decision which lifted the restrictions on corporate funding and all that. So, on the one hand, politicians make an issue of this, H1B. On the other hand, they take campaign money from companies, IT companies and from Silicon Valley, and quietly they tell them, you know, we won't do anything. We will just move a bill in Congress, and the bill will never come up, you know, and then the bill will go through amendments, it will go to the committees, you know, and then even assuming nothing has been passed, I mean, except minor changes, even if it is passed, the bulk of the contracts are given by the states. So the 50 states, only the rich ones give out these contracts. So, in order to give these contracts, the state assemblies, the state provincial legislatures have to pass things. There again the same thing works, no? People who are elected to state houses, they may make an issue about it, but they also collect money, election funding from these companies. So, ultimately the process is very slow. If anything at all happens to H1B, it will only happen during Trump's time, because as far as I am aware, Trump's own business empire does not include information technology,
right,
you know.
Right.
It is IT, it is real estate and things like that. And real estate doesn't come under H1B. I mean, a few engineers get, but then, you know, the other sectors that patronize H1B are nurses, teachers. So Trump has no business interest in H1B at all. So if anything happens, it will only happen during the Trump era. But then again, Trump has to contend with opposition from the Congress. Trump cannot ignore, as Ambassador said, and Professor Chowlea said, that he has to contend with the loss that the American economy, the competitiveness of the American economy will incur if this project is, H1B project is.
So there's much to be factored in, really, as far as this particular issue is concerned.
Yes, and it will be a slow process. My point is that the whole thing, when the change comes, it will come in a slow process.
All right. Professor, you know, is the H1B issue a sticking point between India-US ties?
It could become so, Frank, over time, because overall, you know, lakhs of our Indian IT professionals have moved back and forth in the past decades through this program. So, if it is drastically hampered, then obviously it will hurt, as I said, the trade in services between the two countries. And as far as relations go, I think the anti-immigrant focus of the Trump administration is actually more on the Latinos, the Hispanics, coming via Mexico from Central America. They are basically trying to shut down the southern border of the United States against any foreign low-skilled workers coming in. So, given that Indian IT professionals belong to medium to high skilled category, and H1B is supposed to be for higher skilled workers, I think the economic rationale is very strong for it to be retained. Although I must say one factor which Mr. Nair didn't mention is that over the last couple of years, the degree of scrutiny for each application, the rejection rate for applications by companies that are seeking H1B quotas has actually hit a record level. So it's not that they have completely, they are simply, you know, rhetorically brandishing a sword. The enforcement actions have been taking place and have been restricting already a large number of firms that apply, and then they are asked to provide additional proof. And now the specialty requirement means that there more, you know, justification will be required for bringing in overseas workers by outsourcing firms. So I think in a way the effect has already started, and this is part of the overall problem with the Trump administration, which is based on pacifying emotional anxieties of the white working class in America. I mean, you look at the losses being caused by H1B, alleged losses. I mean, you have a few hundred disgruntled Americans who were fired from a few companies and who filed suit saying that, look, the Indians are coming and taking over, and look at, for example, Disney as a company. Now, on the other hand, if you look at the overall benefits that I've been mentioning, that the US economy, not just Disney as a company, gets from the H1B, it's enormous.
Right.
So, as a saying goes, you know, in outsourcing, what goes around comes around. So, this is like a virtuous circle where capital and skilled people are being circulated. It benefits everyone. But so, I think that logic should prevail in the long run. But definitely, Trump is different. Trump is far more radical. Trump is far more far right than any American president ever. He's far more anti-free trade and anti-globalization than any president ever. So for those reasons, I think that the danger is much greater now, and I had foreseen this at the time when Trump was elected itself, that economic relations are going to be far bumpier, because he is a core protectionist, Frank.
All right.
And a protectionist president who is willing to play to the galleries is a danger signal, and we should not take it lightly.
Okay, we should not take, you know, the Trump administration lightly is what you're suggesting. Closing comments from all my guests. I'm going to ask you to be brief. We've got 3 minutes, you know. Ambassador, has this issue been raked up yet again as a result of the S-400 deal and maybe even the Iran sanctions, do you think? Or this is just, you know, it's not related at all?
No, it's not related to all that. The H1B visa program came into being in 1990, but it became a big political issue only after the recession of 2008. The economic benefits to America and American companies from this program have never been in doubt. But the political aspect of it has come into the forefront, with politicians alleging that US workers are losing jobs because these jobs are being given to foreign workers. And because there are lots of Indians who have got H1B visas and are in the US working, therefore there is a danger to their situation. No one questions in America the economic advantages, because these workers are good, they're cost effective, their contribution to the American economy is enormous.
Right.
But there is this misplaced logic that they are causing a loss of jobs vis-a-vis the American workers.
All right.
And we have to counter that, because they are not displacing American workers. American workers are not available to fill in many of the slots which the Indian workers are occupying.
Right. Mr. Nair, is this issue going to have any bearing or vice versa on the midterm polls?
I don't think so. Per se, this issue is not going to be a major thing in the midterm congressional elections. But there is a possibility that after the elections it may become an issue, because if Democrats take the House and in the Senate if the balance is changed, then Trump will realize that for his own re-election he needs emotive issues. Then he will judge what are the issues. And American jobs for American workers is likely to be an issue for Trump, which will favor him. So he may make an issue of it, a deeper issue of it, after the midterm elections. But Frank, I also want to mention that, you know, we have to act responsibly in this as media. You know, these stories that are appearing, I think these are stories that create panic in places like Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka, where children of parents there, they depend on H1B, they are there. And irresponsible reporting on this issue creates panic in these cities, you see.
Right.
So I would appeal that when you see a story about H1B, try to look at who has written this. If it is written by a correspondent in Washington, irrespective of the newspaper, news agency, that has greater credibility because they know the issue. They are there. They are on the ground. So it is necessary to be discriminating in reading media reports about this issue.
All right, absolutely. Professor, close the show for us with your concluding remark, and I'm going to ask you to be brief, please.
Sure. Interdependence and bilateral cooperation are the basis for India-US relationship to go forward. Any threat to interdependence and any sense that we could decouple the two economies and that the USA will grow on its own and doesn't need India or Indian skilled professionals is a misnomer, and we have to continuously challenge it, not only in terms of diplomacy and lobbying behind the scenes, but also intellectually and in the public domain. We should put out a large-scale campaign to show the benefits of H1B for the US workers and for the US economy, and continue the convincing all the way until the end of Trump's first term.
All right. With that, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.